Hello everyone, Douglas here, and welcome to my Doctor Who review, and today I will be reviewing the second two-part story, The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. This story is the first one to be written by Steven Moffat, who would go on and become the showrunner in the new series, but more on that later. This story is the first story for John Barrowman as Captain Jack Harkness. Yes! The episode had a working title called World War II. Early versions of the script quoted the episode's title as being An Empty Child. This is a reference to the first Doctor Who story, An Unearthly Child. On the DVD cover, it did mention that London is being terrorized by an unearthly child. This story also won a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation back in 2006. I remember when I first watched this story as a kid, I was really scared of this story. In part 1, called The Empty Child, our cold open scene begins at the Axon. We see the TARDIS is going after an object, and inside the TARDIS, we see the Ninth Doctor, played by Christopher Eccleston, and Rose, played by Billie Piper. We see the object is going back in time, and it's 30 seconds from the center of London. Our opening scene begins, and it is dark, and we see the TARDIS lands, and we see someone is watching the Doctor and Rose. I love Rose's line when she says, "Give me some spark, for once, would it kill you?" We hear a voice, and it says, "Mommy!" We see Rose is looking, and she sees a kid with a gas mask on the roof. We see the Doctor is inside a nightclub. We see the Doctor takes the stage, and he asks this question, "But has anything fallen from the sky recently?" And we see the audience is laughing. We see Rose is trying to rescue the kid, and we see a rope. Back at the nightclub, we hear sirens go off, and we find out the Doctor is in World War II. We find out the rope is from a barrage balloon, and Rose is hanging on for dear life. And let me say, Rose wears a one shirt at the one place at the one time. A funny line from the Doctor when he is talking to a cat, and he says, "You know, one day, just one day, maybe I'm going to meet somebody who gets the whole don't wander off thing." We hear a telephone goes off in the TARDIS, and we find out it is not a real phone. And we see Nancy, played by Florence Hough, and she tells the Doctor not to answer it. We see the Doctor is spying on Nancy. We see that someone spotted Rose, and it's Captain Jack Harkness. We see Nancy is stealing food from the house. We see Nancy gives a whistle, and we see kids. We see Rose falls off, and who saves her? Jack. We do see that someone is watching the kids. We see that Nancy is serving the kids food. One of the scenes I like is when the kids is getting one slice of meat. And who shows up? The Doctor. We find out from the kids that they were evacuated from London and came back. We see the Doctor is asking the kids that he is looking for the object. And Nancy knows something. We hear a knocking, and it's the gas-masked kid. We find out from Nancy that it's not exactly a child. We see the Doctor notices the scar on the back of his hand. We see the Doctor is going to open the door, and he is gone. Back on Jack's ship, we see Rose has rope burns, and we see the nanogenes, and Rose's hands are healed. One of the scenes I like is when we see Jack and Rose on top of his spaceship with Big Ben in the background. We see the Doctor followed Nancy. We see that Nancy wants the Doctor to talk to someone, and that is the Doctor. One of the best scenes is that we see Jack activates Big Ben, and we see Jack and Rose are dancing to Moonlight Serenade by Glenn Miller. We find out from Jack that the object that fell is a Chula warship. We find out that the empty child is Nancy's brother, Jamie. We see the doctor is going to the hospital, and the hospital is Ellerbourne Hospital, and that was the same hospital in Aliens of London. We are inside the hospital, and the doctor notices that the patients have gas masks. We are introduced to the doctor, Dr. Constantine, played by Richard Wilson. We also see the patients have the same scars, and we find out the gas mask is fused to the flesh. We also see that Dr. Constantine has the same scar, and I think you might know what happens next. One of the scenes that scared me is when Dr. Constantine hits the bucket with his cane and the gas mask zombies are up and they go back to bed. One of the lines I like from Dr. Constantine when he says, "Before this war began, I was a father and a grandfather. Now I'm neither, but I'm still a doctor." And the doctor says, "Yeah, I know the feeling." And that is a reference to Susan. We find out from Dr. Constantine that Nancy knows more than saying, and we see him turning into a gas mask zombie, and that was scary. We see Jack and Rose arrives at the hospital. I like Jack's line when he says, "It's a real pleasure to meet you, Mr. Spock." We see the gas masked kid followed Nancy to the house. We find out the warship was an ambulance. We find out that Jack is a con man. We see Nancy is trapped with the gas-masked kid, and we see the gas-masked zombies are waking up, and the doctor, Rose, and Jack are surrounded. One of the scary scenes is we see a close-up shot of the gas-masked kid, and we see no face. And that is the end of part 1. In part 2, called The Doctor Dances, we hear the doctor says, "Go to your room." Go to your room. I mean it. I'm very, very angry with you. I'm very, very cross. Go to your room. We see the gas mask zombies go to bed, and we see the gas mask kid leaves Nancy. And a funny line from the doctor when he says, "I'm really glad that worked. Those would have been terrible last words." I do agree with that. We hear the old clear siren, and Nancy gets caught. We see that Jack has a squareness gun, and the doctor, Rose, and Jack go into room 802. We are in the room, and everything is destroyed. We do see drawings, and you get the idea this is the gas-masked kid's room. And it is. We see the doctor turns on a tape machine, and we hear the recordings of Dr. Constantine and the gas-masked kid. We see Nancy needs wire cutters and a torch. We see the tape ended, and we still hear the voice, and we find out from the doctor that he sent it to its room. And what's in the room? The gas-masked kid. We see the doctor, Rose, and Jack escapes the room. We see the gas-masked child is breaking the wall, and they run. And we see the gas-masked zombies. I like the doctor's line when he says, "I've got a sonic..." Never mind. I like Jack's line when he says, "A sonic what?" And the doctor says, "Screwdriver!" We see Rose aims the gun to the floor, and they fell to the floor. We see Rose turns the lights on, and there are more. We see the doctor, Rose, and Jack run into the storage room, and they are trapped. We see that Jack disappeared and left the doctor and Rose alone. We find out from Nancy that she is going to the site. We see Jack contacts the Doctor and Rose through radio by Omcom, and we find out from the Doctor that the child can Omcom too. One of the creepiest scenes when we hear the child, and I can hear you, coming to find you, coming to find you. We see Nancy is sneaking in. I like Rose's line when she says the world doesn't end because the Doctor dances. We see the Doctor and Rose on Jack's ship. We see Nancy makes it to the crash site, and she is busted. We find out from Jack, when he was working for the Time Agency, they stole 2 years of his memories. We see that one of the soldiers has the same scar. We see the Doctor, Rose, and Jack arrives, and we see Jack is going to distract the guard, and he is also infected. We find out from the Doctor the effect is airborne. We see the Doctor hears Nancy singing, and the Doctor sets her free. We find out the emergency protocols have been activated. I love the crash-in shot on the gas mask kid, and we see the gas mask zombies are awake, and we see them leave the hospital. I like Rose's line when she says this to Nancy: the Germans don't come here. They don't win. We find out the ambulance ship is empty, but it was carrying something on board. And do you know what it was? The nanogenes. We see Nancy notices the gas mask zombies have arrived. We find out from Nancy that it's her fault, and we find out Nancy is not the sister, but the mother. We see the gas masked child arrives. We see Nancy and the child hug each other, and we see the nanogenes. I like the Doctor's line when he says, "Oh, come on, give me a day like this. Give me this one." And we see the child is back to normal. A funny line from the Doctor when he says, 20 years to pop music, you're gonna love it. We see the bomb is coming down, and we see Jack stops it. We find out from Jack the bomb started detonation and he put it in stasis, but it won't last long. And we see Jack flies away. One of the greatest scenes I love is when we see the Doctor is wielding the nanogenes, and a great line when he says, "You want moves, Rose? I'll give you moves." And we see the Doctor throws the nanogenes, and everyone is back to normal. And a great line from the Doctor when he says, "Everybody lives, Rose. Just this once, everybody lives." When you go back to the Time War, you know the Doctor felt guilty and he couldn't save everyone. And even though this story takes place in World War II, he saves everyone. On Jack's ship, we find out the bomb has 3 minutes till detonation. We zoom out, and we find out the TARDIS is on Jack's ship. And Jack gets on board the TARDIS, and we see the Doctor and Rose are practicing dancing. We see the TARDIS taking off, and a good line from the Doctor when he says, "Rose, I've just remembered, I can dance." And we see the Doctor and Rose are dancing too, in the mood. And that was a fun scene to watch. And that is the end of the story. I will say, for Steven Moffat's first story, it is a scary classic. I will admit, the CGI still holds up. I think Christopher Eccleston gives a great performance in this story, and he did say this is his favorite Doctor Who story he worked on. I really do like Nancy, played by Florence Haas, and she was really good. The music by Maury Gold is scary, the script by Steven Moffat is scary, and the direction by James Hawes is great. And I will give The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances a 10 out of 10. So that is my review of The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you next time for my review of Christopher Eccleston's penultimate story, Boomtown.